The kiddo is home, so he's in the next room with TV on, and so my door is closed, so we might have cats banging at the door, or we might not. Because I don't know how long this is going to take, because, you know, I got a new computer, and part of moving to Windows 10 is coming to accept the fact that a lot of my old programs don't work anymore. And most of them I've replaced with open source stuff that seems to work the same, or maybe a little better. It's just a question of if I can actually find out what I want to do is called in the new program. But then there's, okay, I cannot play any musical instruments. I took some college courses in like basic piano, and I had to play a recorder for a semester because I accidentally took a course for teachers teaching music. In the syllabus, it was just called Fundamental Music Skills for the Beginner. But it was actually Fundamental Music Skills for the Beginner Classroom Teacher. Like, oh. So I got into that class and I was like the only person who was taking it for fun. Everyone else was a teacher major who was taking it because they had to. So that was an interesting experience. So I know somewhere in my brain is the ability to play the recorder, but I don't remember how. And I took a basic piano course in college and I could play piano for a semester, but that didn't stick. But I've always had fun with a computer sequencer, a MIDI sequencer. That's where you basically, you plot music notes as little squares on a grid, and then you hit play and it becomes music. Or at least something that sounds like music. And I've always had fun with those. And basically I had been using the same one since 1996 or 7. And as I would update on operating systems, it would mostly work. But it finally got to the point where it was so old and so out of date that Windows 10 wouldn't even install it. So I went out to see what people who had used that, what modern, I always thought of it as a sequencer, but now it's a DAW, digital audio workstation, what people were using for that. So I got that, and it is so much better than what I was using that I've kind of gotten back into messing around with trying to make music again, which does not make for interesting doll videos. But I have done doll things out of guilt. I mean, simple thing. One of the first things I did was, you know, I showed you that my Hujo Freya that I had randomly airbrushed like purple and green a few months ago, and then we got these lovely eyes from Queen of Squids. And I decided that my Freya's color scheme just didn't match these lovely eyes. So because Hujos are made out of ABS plastic, I couldn't use acetone to strip the paint like I do on most vinyl dolls, because, you know, vinyl, soft plastics are resistant to acetone. Resin is somewhat resistant to acetone. I guess if you use too much acetone, you can't start to melt the resin. But for the most part, as far as thermoplastics goes, plastics that will melt and can be reformed, soft stuff has no problem with acetone. But hard stuff, acetone will melt. So I knew I couldn't use acetone to strip the paint off of Freya, so I would decide to see if rubbing alcohol would work. Now in the past when I've tried to use rubbing alcohol to strip paint off of vinyl dolls, it hasn't worked well. As a matter of fact, rubbing alcohol has been recommended as if I had painted over original doll paint and wanted to strip off just what I had painted. You could use the rubbing alcohol to take off my layer of paint and it would leave the original layer of paint alone. So I wasn't expecting much from the rubbing alcohol, but it worked really, really well. I did not get into the crevices, but my Freya is back down to the basic original gray. So I'm not sure at all how I want to repaint her. I just know I want it to be something worthy of those eyes. So that was one small doll project. I don't want to risk chipping it by rattling around inside the head. Another small doll project, also involving something that Queen of Squids made, was one of the things that she had sent in the surprises in the box was a dress she had made for Fresh Dolls. Of course, me being me, I want to try it on another doll, so I actually sat down the other day and put it on Banderai Sakurana. The thing is, I did have to add a snap in the back to adjust it, so. And this is a sheer top, so she's wearing an old Tuesday Tailor bikini top under it. So it's always fun. Sakurana is somebody who Basically, if I've had a doll for a while, you know I like it, because I tend to cycle through dolls pretty fast. So I've had Sakura for several years now. And I don't redress her, as I don't change her clothes as much as I probably should to show how much I like her, but I always have fun when I do change her clothes. So there she is. I haven't gotten a picture. I haven't gotten pictures of most of this stuff yet because music. And then I thought I would do odds and ends of doll painting. To that end, one of the first things I did was I stripped all the paint off of McGonagall. Obviously, I have not repainted her, and also was messing with her hair. I think reshape it to be down like that, although I'll probably get rid of it and either put a wig on her or eventually reroute her with a fantasy hair color. But that's her sculpt without paint. I think I told you one of the things I would do next time I had paint out is I would give that little green girl her proper orc tusks. So there she is. And I also discovered that her lip paint was in kind of bad shape, so I touched that up. I can't remember if I painted over it completely or if it's just the Tonti red that I happen to have matched pretty well. And her tusks are pretty uneven, and then, you know, but this was just a quick fun. Now I have a little orc girl I can have frolic outside when it's warm. So that was just giving her her tusks and touching up her lips. And also someone who needed to be touched up was the Creata Flower Princess Starry-Eyed Bride. I showed you last week I replaced the rhinestones in her eyes. Her lips were rubbed away to almost nothing, and her cheeks, her blush, was really badly scraped up too. So I took those off and repainted those quickly. Well, their cheek blush is pastel, but she has all of her lips back. Actually, I did not consult any pictures to see how her original lip shape looked. I just started painting. I also thickened the upper eyeliner above her eyes because the Starry-Eyed Bride dolls are kind of starry-eyed too, because there's no lid covering that rhinestone at all. So I didn't really cover it much, but I think it made a tiny bit of difference. And no pictures of any of these yet. And another little project I've been wanting to do for a while is, thanks to Lori's generosity, I had, you know, multiples of the AA mountain climber, hiker, whatever that made to move doll was called. And she had these orange boots. I had several of these orange boots now. So I wanted to try painting a pair. So that's these. I did not take my time. I should have. This is just one layer of the black paint, and it's really thin in areas, and if you look at it you can see the orange through, and it's really ragged on the edge. I haven't cleaned the edges up yet either. This was just proof of concept more than anything. So don't look too close, but I think they'll be fine in photos. And also I did not detail the individual studs on the side. I just basically did a gold wash. But I think these will be a little more versatile than just big blazing orange boots, and I have another pair that is still completely unpainted. Also, it's an experiment to see, I don't know how long, if the acrylic will remain flexible over time or if it will start to flake off. So that's another reason I didn't put a lot of work in it. Just an idea to paint the boots. The main reason that I had to paint out though is because I wanted to finally paint the face on that Betty Teen head that I had on the older Articulated Fashionista's body with the white wig on it from Safi. And I'm ambivalent about Betty Teen. Part of it is because a lot of people know they like Betty Teen, but then they see Creata and they get them confused and they think Creatas are Betty Teens, but they're not. And then there's that whole weird that Steffi Love looks kind of like Betty Teen too, even to the point where Simba did use the Betty Teen head sculpt for Steffi Love for a few releases. I don't think they ever overlapped the Creata though. We have had a discussion recently how Tonka Aurora, which is kind of like Mattel Spectra with the vacuum metallized bodies, but not. Some of the Auroras also had clear plastic bodies with like brightly colored other plastic parts inside the clear plastic. They used the Creata Starry-Eyed Bride head sculpt. Exactly, to the point where if you look on the back of one of those Tonka Auroras, you will see the Create a 1984 copyright block like that. So I've been thinking about how, you know, different dolls use the same heads across different companies. So that got me thinking about Betty Teen, and I'm okay with Betty Teen. I don't adore Betty Teen. I have thrifted several actual Betty Teen dolls with all their hair, and one of the things about Betty Teen is she has a really weird hair texture, which was originally curly. It just kind of gets weirdly dense and crunchy, but that's one of the things people like about Betty Teen. But Betty Teen's face paint to me just looked a little too blandly sweet. So I got this, I think, did Flo send it to me? I don't remember who sent it to me. This Betty Teen, I think is actually a clone of Betty Teen head, because the quality of the vinyl was not good. They're like pits in the vinyl, and there's no copyright on it at all, and the hair was really sparsely rooted. So I took that hair out, put the white wig on her, and I wiped off the original clone face paint, which there wasn't a lot of it left. And so I finally repainted her. And this is, of course, one of my more understated, stylized face paints. But I'm fairly happy with it. And part of the reason that I painted the moles on her face is because at least one of them, I won't say which one, is covering up one of the pits in her vinyl. Also, that's why her eyebrows are where they are, because one of them starts on a pit in the vinyl. I went back and forth on her eyebrow color for a while. I originally started making her eyebrows white, and that seemed too stark. And then I went over it with light blue, and it was still too stark. So I went over again with the brown, and I think that's where I'm going to settle. So she turned out pretty well. Again, if you know Betty Teen, if you look up Betty Teen's... I have peanut butter on my finger. I'm sorry if I've been sticking that finger up in front of the camera. I was so worried about making sure I didn't have peanut butter on my face, I forgot to check my hands. So, Betty Teen has a very sweet, tends to have very sweet faces with a little more detailed paint than this. So, this is my take on Betty Teen. I'm glad I finally repainted. I finally had the opportunity to repaint one without feeling guilty about ruining one, because they're not so common here in the US. If you ever look anything up about Betty Teen, the biggest website with information about Betty Teen is in Russia. So I think they were a lot more common in Europe. They're not that common in the US. So usually when I find a complete Betty Teen, I will just resell it or find a new home for it in one way or another. So I was glad to be able to play with this one. And the wig helps a lot. Gives her a lot of personality. But then there were some other dolls that I've had around for a while who have needed a face, because I painted their entire bodies green. I only painted one of the faces of one of them yesterday. And I realized the reason that I had not been keen to actually paint this doll is because it's one of the new fashionistas bodies with the vinyl arms and legs, and my paint really wasn't sticking to that harder vinyl very well. And this doll is actually wearing tights because just her legs clacking together, just in the course of, you know, having a doll and her legs coming together, was scraping off paint. And me grabbing her and accidentally touching her with my fingernail was scraping off paint. And then when I was getting her dressed today, I accidentally scraped off a tiny bit on one of her arms. But she's done. Again, I'm always freak out when it comes to painting faces on top of a painted face, because the normal way that I paint and John paint and other people who paint on bare vinyl, the normal way we work with it is we paint, and if the paint goes where we don't want it, we take a toothpick and we scrape the paint off. Because there's nothing under a vinyl and it's fine, it works out fine. But if you have a painted face, you can't do that because you start scraping the base paint. And this had already had vexed me. So when I put it on this body, just the act of flexing the head enough to get it onto the neck actually chipped a whole bunch of paint off of the bottom of the head, which I went through and I touched it up just with a paintbrush. I don't know if it's going to show up here, but in real life you can find it. But because I put pearl coat on the whole doll, so I was able to paint the green over it and then put some pearl coat on it, so it's not too stark. but I don't know if you can see. Here is where I accidentally scraped her arm when I was just getting her dressed. And again, that's why she's wearing the leggings, the tights, because there are just so many scrapes. I wanted to obscure them with this, but I didn't want it to be too opaque so you could actually see that her legs are green. And also I can't imagine how scraped up her feet probably got just in the act of putting shoes on her. So I'm not terribly happy with her. I think her eyes turned out well. Her eyebrows, actually, I think her eyebrows turned out really well. But with her hair, you can't really see them. And to paint a doll like this who actually has the hair originally rooted, this is that what she called Darling Daisy. I don't remember what that fashionista was called with the daisy dress. This is her. And to paint all of her face, I pulled all her hair back and wrapped it up in plastic and masking tape. So when I took that out, her bangs were still doing that. And in my experience, you never know how well the paint is adhered to the head until you do something stupid to find out that it's not well adhered. Like sometimes you can set the hair in boiling hot water and it can get on the face, on the paint, on the head, and there's no problem. Other times you get just the head over the steam from the boiling hot water and the paint starts to ooze off. So instead of risking that, I did the old Blythe customizer trick where you take a cloth, washcloth or a thinner cloth. I used a thinner cloth on her. Get it wet. Not soaking wet, but just damp enough that it's noticeably wet. Put that over the head and then take an iron. Now, of course, the Blythe people, since they're working with large Blythe heads, would use an actual iron. I use my mini iron, my Clover mini iron, which is a thing that a lot of people who sew for dolls have because we think it's going to be great. And then, at least for me, it turned out that a big iron is just better for doll clothes. But when you iron it all, I tend to just scrape my fingers over seams to flatten them out. But again, I'm getting diverted. So I use the mini iron set to hot over the wet cloth, and as long as you can still hear it sizzling, then it's basically only as hot as boiled water, which obviously is what we use to style doll heads, so that's the temperature you want it. Like if you would touch the iron to the bare hair, it would probably melt. But as long as it's on the sizzling cloth, it's boiling hot water temperature. So you can coax the hair at least somewhat into being flat again, like I did with these bangs. See, even when I remove the hat, the bangs are still flat. The hat's not holding it in place. I just wanted to get that color distribution. I'm going to get the black up at the top of the head. That's why she's wearing the hat. So you can do a little bit for styling doll hair without getting the whole head soaking wet if you have a damp cloth and a small iron. So that's what I did since last week. Most of it I did in the last day. And I'm going to, again, I'm having fun with my music program. That might just be a passing fancy. It might be next week I'm going to say I'm over music, but I don't know. I used to spend a lot of time messing around with the music program. Doesn't mean I will ever let anyone else hear my music. Doesn't mean I ever think it'll be anything else anyone wants to hear. But I have so much fun playing with it. And it's pretty new right now. So it's my new toy. I'm sure I will get back to a fair balance of dolls and sewing and music and actual real life stuff like a kid. But for now, this is where I am. And I hope you had a happy holiday if you celebrate it. And with New Year's coming up, I hope that's fun too. And I guess I will see you next year. Thanks for watching.